Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about 10x engineers. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, would you say that a true 10x engineer always writes simple code? Uh, yes and yes, but I think that we have to define that slightly. So my argument is that there is only one true 10x developer in because I don't really see anyone. I've never seen anything that is not that doesn't sort of fall into this bucket. Uh, Let me explain that a little bit. So I don't personally believe that there is such a thing as a person who is 10 times faster at typing, for example. Then, well, maybe there is, but like that's not the average. Even the most talented software developers that I know, the best of the best, are not necessarily people who are just faster at things. The thing that they usually have is an understand, like they can solve very complicated problems that most people would not be able to solve, and they usually solve those problems in a very efficient way, which you can call it a simple solution. As you can imagine, if you have someone who has less talent or someone who has a lot of talent, some problems, as we all know. I mean, if you ask, if it was down to me to solve nuclear fission or something like that, we would all be so royally screwed because I don't have the mind for it, or mathematics or things like that. There are people who are really smart and like really gifted in these areas, like physicists and whatever have you, or scientists and so forth. And so they are like, it doesn't really matter how many regular people you throw at that problem, because one of them will most likely be more efficient at solving that problem than 10 like average Joe, average Jane type of people, right? And so that's the thing that I define as a true 10xer. A true 10xer is an individual who can solve a problem that makes it possible to make progress, or an individual who can simplify a very complicated problem so that people who would not be able to solve it or would take longer to do so will have an easier time doing so. This is how I argue most of societies, like all evolution, all the progress that we make within most fields happens where someone is very smart, a pioneer of some sort, goes and figures something really cool out, like things like electricity or central heating, what have you, right? And they figure out a proof of concept. We refine that until it becomes a streamlined thing that is available to the general public. And to me, a 10x engineer is the sort of person who does that at the code level. Basically, there's quite a lot of complexities within software, and the true 10xers, if we want to call them that, are usually the people who figure out a better way to do something than most other people would have thought of, and that simplifies the job for everybody else. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are focusing on, because that's the perspective I suspect that you might be going for here, which I think is a little bit. It is the truth, but it's a more shallow understanding of the truth, if I may say so, where it might be a junior level software developer thinks that, well, if I want to be a 10xer, then I should write my function really in a really simple way, and then you start focusing on making the perfect variable name, or trying to format your code perfectly, or making like you're going over and over and over how to simplify this problem, when you're dealing with something arbitrary or something trivial where you can't really do that. But the thing that I argue is that that's not what the 10xer does. And when they write simple code, what they do is that they simplify a very complicated problem into something that is digestible. An example would be, if you think about most of the frameworks that you are using today in like web frameworks, or if it's a front-end framework, or if they like things like for people who work in ops and so forth, you have all these different tools that simplify some type of problem for you, so that you don't have to waste tons and tons of time on doing certain things. That's the essence of what I'm going for. The real 10xers are usually people who can deliver something. It can be a coding interface, a library, a tool, a service, etc., that in some way increases quality or development velocity. Like these two, it basically simplifies. That's what it does, right? And so it's not about writing simple code per se, it is about creating an abstraction or something that is consumable, or is a work practice or a pattern or something like that, that someone else can basically just hold up without having to necessarily have thought of it themselves. Think of it as, if you study physics or chemistry or something like that, or math for that matter, you might be able to follow someone's formula that they have invented, but you would never have been able to figure out that formula yourself. But they did it for you, and so now you basically have to just understand what the formula is used for. It's basically a mental tool for you, and that means that you can simplify your process of solving problems using this thing that they created. That is what I argue the 10xers are really, really good at. This is the thing that makes the difference between truly successful initiatives in IT and things that basically are, well, let's say they usually don't scale, because the opposite of this is that you have people create a lot of complications and so forth, and that usually slows everything down. So what I want you to take away from this is that I don't think necessarily that 10xers always write simpler code or very simple code. I think that is a part of it, because a true 10xer will understand other developers or their needs. Again, I think that this is the mark of, a successful product developer or entrepreneur, call it whatever you want, right? You truly understand your consumer, and engineers who write code are producers of a product, which is code, and their consumer is practically always another developer. That's why we talk about having coding practices and having best practices and patterns and things like that, so that it feels familiar. And the people who do this really, really well, they usually create really nice libraries, or they might be working in the same product as somebody else, and they usually have very easy to maintain tests, or easy to maintain functions or classes, whatever that you have, right? The people who are really shit at this, they create a lot of complexity. And this is, in my opinion, the difference between the 10xers and the average programmers. Most programmers create legacy over time. The 10xers are usually the people who can maintain a simple workflow or create some simple abstraction that makes it simpler for everybody else to continue their work. That is the true mark of a 10xer, and that doesn't mean necessarily that the code line by line is simpler, but the consumption is simpler. In other words, their efforts makes everybody else more efficient, or it makes it simpler for other people to just either maintain development speed or increase it somehow. That's how they become 10xers, because if you can make 100 people, 100 average people, able to work twice as fast or something like that, well, then you're close. Then you might not as an individual be able to do that work as quickly as everybody else, but you made it possible for everybody else. You've made everybody more efficient, and that, I argue, is the main way the 10xers make a big difference. And of course, in some cases you have a problem or something like that is fairly complicated, where only a few people would be able to sort of figure that out. Both of these two circumstances sort of amount to the same thing. The 10xer has an ability to simplify something very complicated into something that is digestible for more people than themselves. Have a great day.